She called me cheap after I gave her 10 grand. So I bought the house from under her and kicked her out. You won't believe what happened, so keep listening. This story gets wild. I'm Ashley. I'm 29, married to David, who's 32. David is quiet, kind, and loyal, but sometimes too loyal, especially when it comes to his mom, Loretta. She raised him alone after his dad passed away. She's the kind of woman who always needs to be in control, and even though David and I have been married for 3 years, she never fully accepted. After I got a new job offer in Indiana, we had to move. Money was tight with the relocation, and David suggested we live in his mom's old house, the one she had moved out of when she downsized. It was still in the family and mostly empty. Loretta agreed, but only if we paid her $1,000 a month in. Family or not, nothing's free, she said. I wanted to start on the right foot, so I offered to pay her $10,000 up front, 10 months of rent. She accepted the money, then left for a 2-month vacation in Florida to visit her cousin. For those 2 months, everything was calm. I settled into my remote job, unpacked our things, and started making the house feel like home. I thought maybe this was the beginning of a better relationship with Loretta. I was wrong. She came back early without notice. I was making lunch when she unlocked the door and walked right in. No knock, no hello. Just walked into the kitchen and said, "Oh, I see someone's made herself comfortable." I was confused at first, but then things got worse. That evening, Loretta invited a few of her friends and some distant relatives over. I thought it was just a casual visit, until she stood in front of everyone and said, "This girl thinks she's doing me a favor, paid a little rent, and acts like she owns the place. Cheap girls don't last in real family." I froze. My face was burning. I looked at David, hoping he'd speak up, defend me, anything. But he just stood there, quiet, looking down at his feet. I wanted to cry, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just smiled, held back my tears, and walked out of the room. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done to deserve this. I paid 10 grand, tried to be respectful, and still got humiliated. But something inside me shifted. I realized if no one was going to protect me, not even my own husband, then I'd have to do it myself. And that's when the idea started forming. After that awful night, things only got worse. Loretta didn't just visit, she moved right back in. No warning, no discussion. One day I came home from the grocery store, and there she was, her suitcase by the door and her perfume already filling the hallway. She said, "This is still my house, and I don't want it sitting empty." Just like that, our peace was gone. She made herself at home in every possible way. She took over the kitchen, throwing out my spices and replacing them with her own. Rearranged everything, dishes, cookware, even the pantry. I couldn't find anything anymore. She'd leave little notes everywhere too, scribbled in neat cursive. "Please clean properly. This isn't how we do things here." One note on the fridge said, "Only real meals allowed. Frozen food is for children." Every comment was laced with insult. She hated the way I cooked, said my groceries were cheap, and asked once if I even knew how to feed a man. I laughed it off the first few times, but inside, it was starting to sting. I felt like a guest in my own home. No, not a guest. An intruder. David didn't help. Every time I brought it up, he'd just sigh and say, "That's just how she is. She doesn't mean anything by it." But it did mean something. It meant disrespect. It meant control. And it meant he wouldn't stand up for me again. One afternoon, while walking the dog, I bumped into our neighbor, Mrs. Howard. She was kind and chatty and mentioned she'd spoken to Loretta. "She said she's letting you two stay here for now," she smiled. "That's so generous of her." My stomach dropped. Letting us stay? As if we hadn't paid thousands to live here? As if we were charity cases? I smiled politely, but inside I was boiling. I walked back home in silence, gripping the leash so tight my knuckles turned white. That night, I told David what the neighbor said. "She told people we're living here out of pity. Do you understand how humiliating that?" He looked surprised, but not shocked. "She just talks a lot. Don't take it personally." That's when I realized he wasn't just blind to her behavior. He had been raised by it, trained to excuse it. And somewhere along the way, he learned to accept it. But I didn't. And I never would. It started with a box of old paint cans and ended with a secret that changed everything. I was cleaning out the garage one weekend, partly out of frustration, partly just to escape Loretta's constant hovering. She'd taken over the living room with her TV shows, and David was too wrapped up in his work to notice I was slowly losing my mind. I needed space. Somewhere quiet. So I buried myself in cardboard boxes and cobweb. One of the boxes was heavy and labeled with thick black marker, old papers. Inside were old tax files, receipts, and folders so dusty I sneezed just looking at them. I was about to close it up when I noticed something thicker near the bottom, a manila envelope with deed written on the front. My curiosity kicked in. I opened it and started reading. That's when everything shifted. The deed wasn't just in Loretta's name. In fact, it wasn't hers alone at all. The document showed that the house had been co-owned by Loretta and her ex-husband, Richard. Richard, as I knew from family stories, had passed away several years ago, but his name was still on the deed, and next to it, in bold letters, was a note, 50% ownership pending probate. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting. Loretta didn't own the whole house. Half of it legally belonged to her ex-husband's estate, which meant someone else out there, an heir maybe, had a claim to it. And Loretta? She'd been pretending it was all hers, taking rent money from us, controlling every room, acting like she was doing us a favor. But she didn't own the house. Not fully. My hands were shaking. I slipped the papers back in the envelope and tucked it under my jacket. I didn't tell David. Not yet. I needed to know more before I brought it up. I started researching late at night when Loretta was asleep and David had gone to bed. County records, property laws, probate rules. I went down a rabbit hole I never expected to enter. I even scheduled a quiet meeting with a local real estate attorney. I brought the deed and explained the situation without using name. He confirmed everything I feared and hoped. Loretta had no legal right to claim full ownership unless she bought out the other half, or unless the heir to Richard's share had given it up. But that hadn't happened. The lawyer offered to help me find the heir if I wanted to pursue it. I left his office with a copy of the law in one hand and a plan forming in the other. Loretta had played her game loud and proud, all smiles and fake generosity. But I was about to play mine in silence, with the law on my side. I thought finding the deed would change something. That maybe, just maybe, David would finally see the truth. But when I tried to talk to him about it, he just shook his head and said, "Why are you digging through old papers? She's your mother-in-law, not your enemy. Family doesn't evict family." Those 5 words stuck with me like thorns. Family doesn't evict family. Except, what kind of family treats you like a guest in your own home? Like a burden? Like a threat? Every day felt heavier. I no longer felt like a wife. I felt like a tenant in someone else's house, and not even a welcome one. Loretta walked in and out of rooms like she owned the air. She opened my mail and claimed she was just checking for anything important. She'd glance at my laptop while I worked and ask, "Is that even a real job or just online nonsense?" One day, I overheard her telling David, "Back in my day, women didn't pretend to be busy from home. They actually took care of the house." It didn't stop there. One evening, my college friend Megan came over for dinner. We hadn't seen each other in a while, and I was looking forward to feeling normal for her. Loretta made herself part of the evening, uninvited, sitting down at the table and talking over everything. Then, out of nowhere, she turned to Megan and said, "You're lucky she invited you. We usually don't have guests. This is a private space, you know. She's lucky we tolerate her." Megan laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. I didn't. Something snapped inside me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just stared at Loretta while the noise around me faded. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as David's mother, not as a difficult relative, but as a woman who had bullied her way through life and expected the world to bow to her. That night, while everyone slept, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a notebook. I opened my browser and pulled up the attorney's email. My fingers hovered over the keys, and then I started typing. If David couldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. I wasn't just going to take my space back. I was going to take the house. I wasn't going to confront Loretta. Not yet. She had ruled this house with noise and control, but I was going to win it with silence and strategy. The morning after that awful dinner with my friend, I made an appointment with the probate attorney I had previously contacted. His office was small but warm, tucked behind a courthouse in town. He greeted me like he'd been expecting this moment. I laid out everything: the deed, the probate status, Loretta's assumption that she owned the entire house. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Technically, she doesn't. Her ex-husband's half is still in limbo. But if we can track down his legal heir, you can try to buy their interest. If they're willing to sell, you'll own 50% of the house." I blinked. "Even if I'm not family?" He smiled. "It's property. The law doesn't care about family drama. It cares about paperwork." That's when I got serious. We began tracing records from Richard, Loretta's ex. He didn't have siblings still alive, but he had a niece, a woman named Cheryl living in Kansas. She hadn't spoken to Loretta in over a decade. According to the lawyer's background research, Cheryl had inherited her mother's share of the family estate after a bitter falling out and never looked back. I found her number through a public records search and called her one quiet afternoon. I introduced myself and explained the situation calmly. She remembered Loretta, and not kindly. "I've got no love for that woman," she said. "If you want my share and you're serious, I'll sell it." I wired the money 2 weeks later. Cheryl signed the transfer paperwork through my attorney's office. And just like that, I legally owned 50% of the property Loretta thought was all her. Not just the furniture, not just the bills, actual ownership. On paper. In the system. But I didn't say a word. Every morning, Loretta walked around like she ruled the world. She rearranged flowers in the hallway, reminded David about her house rules, and still criticized me for not acting like a real wife. She had no idea I now shared legal ownership of the house she lorded over. It took everything in me not to smirk. I'd play her game for a little while longer. Let her keep thinking I was the helpless one, the outsider she was letting stay. She had no clue that her kingdom was now mine, halfway. And I was just getting started. Owning half the house gave me a quiet kind of power, but I wasn't finished. Not even close. If Loretta could control everything with just her voice and ego, I was going to take everything back using the one thing she ignored, the law. While digging deeper into property records, I noticed something interesting. There were unpaid property taxes linked to the house, small amounts but overdue. I double-checked the documents, then asked my attorney to confirm. He looked into it and came back with a surprising truth. Your mother-in-law's been neglecting payments for a while, he said. It's not huge, but technically it's a lien against the property. If you pay it off and file it properly, you can use that as leverage. She's at risk of default. It opens a door, a legal door. It took 3 weeks of paperwork, patience, and more meetings with my lawyer. I made the payments directly through the county system and filed everything by the book. It wasn't flashy. There were no dramatic conversations, just signatures, dates, quiet transactions, and legal filings that slowly moved ownership over to me. She never saw it coming. By the time everything was finalized, I owned the house completely. My name alone. On every document. I had gone from guest to full owner without raising my voice or giving her a clue. And still, I didn't say a word. That evening, Loretta sat in her usual spot on the porch, drinking her tea like nothing had changed. I was making dinner when she called out from behind me. You know, Ashley, she said, her voice sharp like always. Some women marry up and still act like they belong in cheap apartments. You may live here, but you've got no roots. You're like a leech, floating. No real place of your own. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, really looked and smiled. Not out of kindness, not even out of anger. Just quiet, calm satisfaction. Because I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. She thought I had no roots. She was sitting in a house I owned. She still thought she had control. But the papers in my drawer said otherwise. Every wall, every door, every step she took now belonged to me. And she didn't even know it yet. But she would. Soon. There was something oddly peaceful about printing the eviction notice. I sat alone at the dining table early that morning, with a cup of coffee in one hand and the final paperwork in the other. The house was quiet. David had left for work, and Loretta was still asleep. I took a deep breath, double-checked the legal language, and signed it with a calm, steady hand. Ashley Morgan, sole owner. It felt like closure. Not just revenge, but justice. After months of humiliation, silence, and passive-aggressive cruelty, I finally had the power to say, enough. I didn't hire a process server. I didn't call the sheriff. I wanted to do this part myself. Around 10 a.m., Loretta was in the backyard sipping her usual morning coffee, wrapped in a silk robe, sunglasses on, acting like the queen of a kingdom she didn't own. I stepped outside with the papers in my hand, heart beating hard but steady. Morning, I said casually. She barely looked up. You finally learned how to make decent coffee? I didn't answer. I just held out the envelope. What's this? She asked, frowning. Read it, I said simply. She opened it slowly, still wearing that smug smile. But as her eyes scanned the first page, I saw it change. First confusion, then disbelief, then anger. Eviction notice? She said, voice rising. Are you joking? Nope. You can't evict me. This is my house. It's not, I said quietly. Check the title page. It's in my name now. She flipped through the pages, her hands trembling slightly. Her eyes locked on the property deed attached in the back. My name, Ashley Morgan, typed in bold letters as the legal owner. You wouldn't dare, she said, standing up, her coffee splashing over the edge of the cup. I looked her in the eye. I already did. She stared at me like I had slapped her. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed, sharp, bitter, almost panicked. David won't let this happen. He's my son. He'll side with me. He won't have to, I said. This isn't about him anymore. This is about you and me. And this house. Loretta opened her mouth to say something else, but the words didn't come. Instead, she stormed past me into the house, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long moment, letting the silence soak in. The backyard felt lighter, the air easier to breathe. For the first time in months, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the guest. I wasn't the one being tolerated. I was the one making the rules. And Loretta? She had 30 days to find somewhere else to drink her coffee. The next morning, Loretta started crying. Not the quiet, thoughtful kind of tears. These were loud, dramatic, meant for an audience sobs that echoed through the house like sirens. She stayed in her robe, tissues in hand, pacing the hallway like she was in a soap opera. When David got home from work, she pounced. "She's kicking me out," Loretta wailed, throwing her arms around him. "Your own mother. After everything I've done. After I let you two live here." David looked stunned. He turned to me, eyes full of confusion. "Ashley, you really filed eviction papers?" I nodded. "I did." "Why?" he asked, almost like he hadn't been living through the chaos with me this whole time. I swallowed hard. "Because I begged you to step in. I asked you over and over to draw a line. And you never did. So I did it for myself." Loretta cried louder, rocking back and forth on the couch like she was heartbroken. "I cooked for you. I raised you alone. Your father left me with nothing, and I held everything together. Now you're letting her throw me out like trash." She looked at me, eyes filled with fake sorrow. "I may not have been perfect, Ashley, but I tried. I gave you a roof, didn't I? I just wanted a little respect. It would have worked on someone else. Maybe even on David. But not on me, not anymore. You didn't give us a roof," I said calmly. "We paid for it. I paid $10,000 up front. And you took it, then told the neighbors we were freeloaders. You didn't want respect. You wanted control." David sat down, rubbing his face with both hands. He didn't say a word. Maybe because deep down he knew I was right. Maybe because his mother's performance was starting to show cracks. Loretta switched tactics, telling stories from when David was a baby, from when they struggled together, from all the sacrifices she made. Her voice broke in just the right places. But I wasn't moved. I'd seen behind the curtain now. This wasn't pain. It was manipulation. The sheriff's department called that afternoon to confirm the removal date. 30 days. That's what she had. No more, no less. When I told Loretta, she looked at me with tears still in her eyes. But this time, I didn't feel guilty, because even her tears weren't real. The 30 days passed slowly, like thick molasses. Loretta didn't go down quietly. In the final week, she packed half-heartedly, leaving piles of clothes in corners and slamming cabinet doors like they owed her something. Every time I passed her in the hallway, she muttered something under her breath. Ungrateful, homewrecker, spoiled little thing. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence between us was louder than any insult she could throw. But the day before she was supposed to leave, everything exploded. It was around noon. I was in the kitchen when I heard a loud crash, glass shattering like lightning. I ran outside and saw her standing in the front yard, a brick at her feet and a broken front window behind her. "Thief!" she screamed, arms shaking. "You stole my house. You stole my son. You're a tramp and a liar." Neighbors peeked out from their windows, drawn by the shouting. Some stepped out onto porches. Loretta didn't care. She wanted the audience. She wanted her pain to be seen, even if it was all made up. "She ruined everything," she cried, voice cracking. "My sweet boy gone, twisted against me by her." David pulled up just then. He got out of the car slowly, taking it all in. The shattered glass, the looks from neighbors, his mother standing in the yard like a woman possessed. She turned to him. "Tell her to stop this. Tell her she can't do this to me." But for the first time in a long time, David didn't move. He stood there, eyes wide, jaw clenched. And then, slowly, he sat down on the front steps and put his head in his hand. "I didn't see it," he whispered. "All this time, I didn't see it." I walked over, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. He looked up at me, tears pooling in his eyes, not from losing her, but from the shame of letting it get this far. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded. "I know." There was a long pause, filled with wind and tension, and the low murmur of neighbors pretending not to watch. Then I said, quietly but firmly, "You let her bury me in this house, David. Every day I disappeared a little more, and you didn't stop it." He looked away. "I had to dig myself out," I added. "I did this for me." And I had. Loretta was removed by the sheriff the next morning. She cursed all the way down the driveway, swearing she'd never forgive either of us. She didn't look back. But I did. I looked back at the house. And this time it looked like home. The house felt different after she left. Not because the walls had changed or the furniture was moved, but because the air was lighter. Like the whole place had finally exhaled. For the first time since we moved in, I could breathe. David and I didn't talk much in the days that followed. We didn't need to. We cleaned. We patched the broken window. We painted over the scuff marks in the hallway where she used to leave her purse. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't demand it. We were just building something new. Together, we chose a soft blue for the living room. Not because it matched anything, but because it made me feel calm. We pulled down her floral curtains and replaced them with clean, simple blinds. We opened every window and let the sunlight pour in. The house wasn't perfect, but it was finally ours. Every inch of it had been fought for. Still, I didn't want to stay. Too many memories lingered in the corner. The looks, the whispers, the weight of all the moments I'd been made to feel small. No amount of paint could erase that. And David understood. One morning over coffee, he simply said, "Let's find somewhere new." So we did. We decided to rent out the house. I met with a realtor, made a few final upgrades, and had the locks changed. We packed our things, not in a rush, but with a quiet sense of purpose. Each box I sealed felt like one more step toward peace. On the last day, I stood in the doorway, taking one final look at the place that had nearly broken me, and also made me stronger than I ever thought I could be. David waited by the car while I turned and reached into my pocket. In my hand was the spare key, Loretta's key, the one she used to swing on her finger while saying, "This is my house." Not anymore. Without a word, I walked over to the trash bin by the curb, lifted the lid, and dropped it in. The metal clink was soft but satisfying. No speeches, no big dramatic goodbye, just silence and freedom. What about David? Do you think he finally saw the truth too late, or was Ashley right to take matters into her own hands from the start? Share your thoughts down in the comments. I'm really curious what you'd have done. And if stories like this speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when a new one drops.